There is the so-called Arcodus, a genus of huge oceanic squid whose length reaches 18 meters in length. The largest specimen was found in 1887 on the coast of New Zealand. Its length was 17.4 meters. Unfortunately, nothing was said about the weight. Giant squid can be found in subtropical and temperate zones of the Indian, Pacific, and Atlantic Oceans. They live in the water column, and they can be found both a few meters from the surface and at a depth of 1 kilometer. No one is able to attack this animal except one, namely the sperm whale. At one time it was thought that a terrible battle was played out between these two, the outcome of which remains unknown to the last. But recent studies have shown that Archaeodus loses in 99% of cases, because the force is always on the side of the sperm whale. If we talk about squids caught in our time, we can tell about a specimen that was caught by fishermen in the Antarctic area in 2007, see the first photo. Scientists wanted to examine it, but could not at that time. There was no suitable equipment, so they decided to freeze the giant until better times. As for the size, they are as follows: body length 9 meters and weighs 495 kilograms. Even ancient seafarers told horror stories in sailors' taverns about attacks of monsters that would surface from the abyss and sink entire ships, entangling them with their tentacles. They were called krakens. They became legends. Their existence was regarded rather skeptically. But even Aristotle described an encounter with the great tooties that plagued travelers who plied the waters of the Mediterranean. Where does fiction end and truth begin? Homer was the first to describe the kraken in his tales. Scylla, which Odysseus encountered in his wanderings, is none other than the giant kraken. Gorgon Medusa * borrowed tentacles from the monster, which over time were transformed into snakes. And of course, Hydra, defeated by Hercules, is a distant relative of this mysterious creature. On the frescoes of Greek temples you can find images of creatures that wrap their tentacles around entire ships. Soon the myth took on flesh. People encountered the mythical monster. It happened in the west of Ireland when, in 1673, a storm tossed a creature the size of a horse, eyes like dishes, and many spurs onto the seashore. It had a huge beak, like an eagle's beak. The remains of the kraken were for a long time an exhibit, which was shown to all comers for big money in Dublin. Carl Linnaeus, in his famous classification, classified them in the category of mollusks, calling them sepia microcosmos. Subsequently, zoologists systematized all the known information and were able to give a description of the species. In 1802, Denis de Montfort published a book called A General and Private Natural History of Mollusks, which later inspired many adventurers to find the mysterious deep-sea animal. The year was 1861, and the steamer Dlecton was making a routine voyage across the Atlantic. Suddenly a giant squid appeared on the horizon. The captain decided to harpoon it. And they even managed to drive several sharp pikes into the kraken's hard body. But 3 hours of struggle went in vain. The clam sank to the bottom, almost dragging the vessel with it. Scraps of meat, weighing 20 kilograms, were left at the ends of the harpoons. The ship's artist managed to sketch the struggle between the man and the animal, and this drawing is still kept in the French Academy of Sciences. The second attempt to take the kraken alive was made 10 years later, when he fell into a fishing net near Newfoundland. People fought for 10 hours with the stubborn and freedom-loving animal. They were able to pull it ashore. The 10-meter carcass was investigated by the famous naturalist Garvey, who preserved the kraken in salt water, and the exhibit delighted the visitors of the Museum of History in London for many years. 10 years later, on the other side of the earth, in New Zealand, fishermen were able to catch a 200-kilogram, 20-meter clam. The most recent find was a kraken found in the Falkland Islands. It was only 8 meters long, and is still preserved in the Darwin Centre in the British capital. What is he like? This animal has a cylindrical head, several meters long. Its body changes color from dark green to purple-red, depending on the mood of the animal. Krakens have the biggest eyes in the animal world. They can be up to 25 centimeters in diameter. In the center of the head is the beak. This is a chitinous formation with which the animal grinds up fish and other food. It can also use it to bite through an 8 centimeter thick steel wire. The kraken's tongue has a curious structure. It is covered with small teeth, which have different shapes, allow them to grind food and push it down the esophagus. Not always the meeting with a kraken ends with the victory of people. Here's an incredible story on the internet. In March 2011, a squid attacked fishermen in the Sea of Cortez.